Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings from New York. Buenos tardes. All courtesies observed. Hope springs eternal. When in dark moments I consider the realities of climate and ocean change, and such deeply disturbing symptoms as ocean acidification, the death of coral, extinction of species, and rising sea levels, as a loving grandfather, I can never allow despair in the door. It's not that I choose optimism over pessimism, for neither is as useful as hard-nosed pragmatism. It's because I have faith in two of the greatest qualities of our species. Ever since our ancestors walked forth from East Africa, through all the wrong turns and man-made disasters met along the journey, two innate strengths have carried us forward. By deploying them, we developed agriculture. We created urbanized industrial societies, and we invented technologies that have taken us to the moon and back. The first quality is that of sharing, without which Homo sapiens would not have been able to go beyond hunting and gathering. The second is that of innovation, the quality that took us from the stone to the space age. When faced with Malthusian crises, be they famine, plague, or war, we've either applied these two qualities to the best of our abilities, or we have succumbed. The alternatives of selfish greed and regression have worked for some in the short term, but in the long haul they are self-defeating, while the rest of us have resumed our march in search of the common good through inventiveness and cooperation. Here in the 21st century, facing up to the grim truths of climate change and the fact that we have brought this crisis upon ourselves, we must now devise better ways of sharing, and we must apply ourselves to innovation as never before. It is this line of thinking that we approach the sustainable blue economy in, as an area of great opportunity in which new ideas are being developed, disseminated, and put into practice. The sustainable blue economy will create jobs and reduce poverty and contribute to the eradication of hunger. From economic opportunities offered by technologies that will make the shipping industry greener, more fuel efficient, quieter, and safer, to the development of plant-based feeds and sustainable techniques that will allow aquaculture to provide us with all the protein we need for future food security. I'd like to emphasize the S word in sustainable blue economy. Without it, the blue economy would be just another round of humankind's linear exploitation of the planet's finite resources. A truly sustainable blue economy must provide inclusive social, economic, and environmental benefits, not just for current, but for future generations as well. To do so, it must be ruled by the precautionary principle and be well informed by scientific evidence. It should thus come as no surprise that one of the 10 targets of SDG 14, the UN's ocean goal, is to increase scientific knowledge, develop research capacity, and transfer marine technology. In other words, it calls for us to scale up our science-based innovations and better share our efforts and results. That target is specifically aimed at improving the health of the ocean and enhancing the contribution of marine biodiversity to the progress of developing countries. It is in the spirit of innovation and sharing that we should welcome the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, 2021 to 2030. Through comprehensive observation, mapping of the ocean floor, developing fuller understanding of the multi-stresses affecting the ocean's complex ecosystems, and through the scaling up of our capacity development to provide better climate services and disaster warnings, the decade will represent an enormous step forward in our relationship with our planetary environment. I urge you all to fully support IOC UNESCO in its lead role in the design and implementation of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is now widely acknowledged that meaningful partnerships guided by mutual trust and respect are essential to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, and SDG 14 is no exception in that regard. Joining with UN member states and the United Nations system, we urge non-governmental organizations, the private sector, the scientific community, and philanthropic organizations to forge partnerships that will mobilize the actions urgently needed to meet the challenges of ocean change, climate change, and biodiversity loss. The ocean is the common heritage of mankind, and SDG 14 is a universal goal. Thus, we have a universal responsibility to meet its targets and bring humanity back into a relationship with the ocean based on respect and balance. SDG 14 calls upon us to conserve and sustainably use the ocean's resources for sustainable development. Please note the repetition of the S word in the formula that the UN member states agreed upon in 2015. For going forward, sustainability must indeed be the governing principle of all that we undertake upon and under the surface of the ocean. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the UN Ocean Conference held in New York in 2017 was a global game changer in its raising of awareness of the deep problems being faced by the ocean. The conference was organized to lend support to the implementation of SDG 14, and amongst its many positive outcomes, the conference witnessed the formation of an impressive array of multi-stakeholder partnerships and more than 1,500 voluntary commitments to implement SDG 14. My appointment as UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for the Ocean arose from the conference, with terms of reference to continue supporting the achievement of SDG 14. It has been very encouraging for me to witness the spread of ocean action initiatives around the world in the years since the 2017 UN Ocean Conference. A particularly noteworthy example was the Global Sustainable Blue Economy Conference convened by the Government of Kenya and co-hosted by the governments of Canada and Japan in Nairobi in November last year, at which marine science, research and technology transfer received wide support. I encourage you to examine the outcomes of that conference. For now, preparations are underway for the 2020 UN Ocean Conference to be held in Lisbon 2 to 6 June next year, co-hosted by the governments of Portugal and Kenya. In Lisbon, the overarching theme will be the scaling up of ocean action based on science and innovation for the implementation of SDG 14. So I look forward to greeting many of you in Lisbon next year. Ladies and gentlemen, I close my words with reference to the ocean climate nexus. For within this inseparable, complex and changing association is where the sustainable blue economy must learn to adapt and prosper. Let us remember that ocean acidification, deoxygenation and warming have profound implications for life in the ocean. And let us recognize that they have one common enemy, namely the greenhouse gases we have been pumping into the atmosphere since the onset of the Industrial Revolution. The ocean is forgiving and can give back if we learn to treat it right. A paper presented by the High-Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy during the United Nations Secretary General's Climate Action Summit last week highlighted that ocean-based climate solutions can deliver 1/5 of the annual cut of greenhouse gas emissions needed by 2050 to keep temperature rises below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This would mean developing the sustainable blue economy in the direction of ocean-based renewable energy, including wind and wave, tidal, current and solar. It would mean decarbonizing ocean-based transportation, otherwise known as green shipping. It would involve hugely scaling up coastal and marine ecosystems investments, including initiatives like seaweed farming and the establishment of high seas marine protected areas. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, two maxims have proved true throughout our story. Firstly, that change is inevitable, and secondly, that together we are stronger. Science has spoken on the imminent extent of the first of these truths, so we live in a time when human innovation must once more come to the fore. Yes, change is underway, but it is inconceivable to me that humans are running out of innovative ideas to deal with it. And together, if we're prepared as individuals, communities and governments to make the necessary changes for the common good, to get back into a proper relationship with nature and to conserve what remains of biodiversity, I firmly believe future generations of humankind will continue to prosper on this planet. And I thank you for listening to these thoughts.